Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As many of us go through life and we approach our 50s and onto our 60s, sometimes we might have found that life has been complicated enough and we try to find a way to unwind that. Maybe it's about getting back to the common sense feeling of feeling loved and actually respected and accepted as well, sort of the feeling you might get from a small town. As a matter of fact, that's exactly where our guest hails from. It's a small place known as Cuba City, Wisconsin, which boasts about 2,000 people, which all have a firm appreciation for hard work. And our guest today is also hugely successful with an online book club simply titled DearReader.com. She's joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today to talk about a specific book that she's created, simply known as Muffins Mayhem, Recipes for a Happy If Disorderly Life. And I'd like to welcome to our program today our guest here on the Beyond 50 radio program, Suzanne Beecher. Suzanne, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Now, why a recipe book? Is it just because it could be multifunctional in case people just aren't really interested in the stories but the recipes?
Well, they'll be interested in both. It's almost a guarantee. Because even if you don't like to cook, the recipes are such that, one of the things, like I'll look through a lot of catalogs that come, and sometimes I even circle the things that I want, and I usually don't end up placing an order, but it's just satisfying enough to kind of imagine I'm wearing them, or I'm mixing up that cake, or something like that. But so I'm sure readers will enjoy either, but actually, the recipes came about in the book because it was one of the inspirations for me even writing the book. A couple of things happened. One, I'm a daily columnist at DearReader.com. I write a column every day, Monday through Friday. And a reader, a young mother, who'd been reading with me for a number of years, sent me an email. She said she had 3 young children. She was diagnosed with lung cancer, and it was terminal. And that recently in one of my columns, she had read about where I kept a file of things that I'd written, that other people had written, that I would go and read when I needed to get myself grounded. And she said that she realized this is what she wanted to leave behind for her children. So she asked me for some ideas about what she might say to her children, also a list of books. And in my reply to her, I started thinking about the recipe cards that my Grandma Hale has left for me. They're in her handwriting, so whenever I'm making something off of one of Grandma's recipe cards, it's kind of like she's right there in the kitchen with me. Mm-hmm. And so I suggested to the mom, I said, I think you should make a recipe box for each one of your children, put your favorite recipes in it in your own handwriting, but then on some blank recipe cards, answer some questions, tell them some things about yourself. And I like the idea of the recipe card because it wasn't, I felt it wouldn't be intimidating to someone who's not a writer, and you don't have this little blank page staring at you instead of this huge blank screen. And I gave her some suggestions like tell them about the first date you had with their dad. Tell them about a time you told a lie and what happened, and how you had to get out of it or make amends, things like that, things that she would probably tell her kids along the way, except she wasn't going to be there to do that. And after that, I realized that this woman left a gift behind for me too, because when I went through my own recipe box, I realized that behind almost every recipe there was a story, and thus came Muffins Mayhem, Recipes for a Happy If Disorderly, because my life is a little crazy, life.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's really interesting that you use the idea of the recipe book with the stories comes through, because just as you said, when you bring up a recipe, there's usually a story behind it. That is if you have your own recipe box. Most people probably have a lot of cookbooks and maybe some handwritten recipes, but you just said something that I thought was very valuable that is really sort of, to me, dying off this day and age, and that's the handwritten word. And I could see how this would be a marvelous legacy, because when you pick up a recipe card, say you wrote out by hand, and then you have a little story on the back that's written out by hand, when somebody picks that up and reads it, especially if it's a family member or a really good friend, that really comes alive. It's as though the spirit is really there talking to you.
You're absolutely right. And if people are thinking of writing something on a recipe card. It doesn't have to be a long story, because even a few words, I mean, in listening to you talk about that, I was thinking back to after my mother died. She also died from lung cancer. And I was an only child, and so I was, had to sort through her things. What are we going to keep? What am I not going to keep? And it was so difficult for me when I would see a piece of paper, really just any scrap of paper with my mother's handwriting on it. It just felt like, oh my gosh, I can't get rid of this. I felt like my mother was right there, and it was a very difficult process. Thank heavens my husband was there to help me. But you're absolutely right. Knowing that this is Mom's or Grandma's handwriting, or your daughter's handwriting, it's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did you decide on the recipes? Were these recipes that actually was from the inspired reader that you were talking about earlier?
These recipes are favorite recipes of my own, the actual cooking recipes. Okay. These are not just like recipes that are, just filling the book, but these are recipes that I make all of the time, and they're like, even like the funeral cake recipe and the story behind it. When I was a little girl, in Cuba City, small town, whenever anyone had a relative or someone in the family there locally that passed on, neighbors would bring casseroles and things over. And every time, what I referred to, it was a devil's food cake with buttercream frosting, but I called it the funeral cake because it would show up every single time. And coincidentally, later on, after my mother died and the funeral cake showed up, I realized that one of my shirt-tailed relatives who lived in Cuba City had been bringing the cake all this year to all of the homes, and so I got the recipe for it. So every one of these recipes are favorites, and I make them over and over again.
Mm-hmm. I keep remembering as we talk about the idea of the handwritten recipe card is not too long ago I had my wife's son actually write out a recipe for clam chowder that we put together. Yeah, and he was reluctant. I mean, here I was going to pay this kid $10 just to do that, And the funny thing is as we say that years later, because he was 13 doing this, is that reluctance to want to do anything besides sit in front of the computer. He's going to realize, geez, I needed better penmanship, I think. But at least the recipe turned out good, that kind of a thing. Well, I was looking through the recipes, and one of them that really struck my eye here was skunk beans.
Skunk beans is...
Sounds like a Wisconsin dish if I've ever heard one.
Well, it is, and the really funny thing about it is, I had to include it in the book because I make skunk beans like at every holiday meal, and in fact, the neighbors, I took the skunk beans down. They had a like buffet dinner, and one of the local chefs at the big hotel here in Sarasota, he happened to be there, and in the middle of the dinner, he stood up. Who made these skunk beans? These are fabulous. So that's how good they are. But I didn't actually know where that recipe came from until after the book was published, and it was just like about 4 weeks ago. I was digging through some old recipes because I haven't even gotten through all the ones that my mom and grandma left behind. I ran into this piece of paper. It was folded over, a little bit yellowed, and it said beans for skunk party. And you're right, it's a Midwestern thing because my dad, on his side of the family, they were big euchre players. And there are just hundreds of terms in euchre, but one of them is getting skunked. You skunk your team, they don't get any points. And so I realized instantly that obviously my parents, or maybe just my mom, I don't know, they weren't very good euchre players. They had to bring the skunk beans a lot.
That's funny. I was just thinking about a piece in your book, as we talk about relating stories to recipes, and you had this situation with the squirrels in Florida, and there was a place that we used to live where there was a walnut tree that was right next to the house, so the squirrels could easily get onto the roof. Sometimes you'd hear drag races going across the roof, and I thought to myself, why not create a squirrel spaghetti story, which was pretty interesting. But tell us about squirrel psychology as you relate to it in your book.
Well, I have, when we first moved to Florida, we've lived here now over 16 years, but when we first moved here, getting used to all of the animals and, creatures was quite a challenge. And you'd think squirrels would be the same as they are in Wisconsin, but I'm here to tell you these squirrels in Florida, I don't know, they seem much feistier because we have many, many squirrels out in our trees. And I do love to watch them because they make these huge nests up in the tree, and I picture them like, running up and down and the neighbors coming over to visit, and I don't know, maybe it's the writer in me. But these squirrels, they bury their acorns or nuts, whatever kind of nuts they find, in my garden, even though it never gets cold enough here where they, can't forage for food.
Right.
And then when I'm sitting out in a lawn chair, these squirrels one day, they were dropping nuts down at me because apparently, of course this is all my own theory, but apparently I must have been too close to where they have buried something, they wanted to go and get it, or they just wanted me out of there. And I thought it was my imagination at first, but these little guys were pelleting me with nuts. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be creative. The next day I'm just going to set a basket of nuts out there for the squirrels, to get. We'll find a sort of peace treaty here. And by golly, if they didn't take the nuts, I gave them in the basket and throw those at me too.
Wow. That's audacity if I've ever heard it.
I still love them. A neighbor a few blocks down, a few months ago, I noticed that there was a blackbird caught in a little trap, and so I knocked on the door and let him know. And he said, "Oh, well, that shouldn't have happened." He said, "I'm catching squirrels. I don't like the squirrels in my yard." I said, "Well, what are you doing with them?" He says, "Oh, I take them over to church. I'm making Presbyterians out of them."
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, but I love the squirrels in my yard.
Now, when you talk about this book being inspired by a reader who had lung cancer, sometimes within our lives it could be someone in our immediate family or a very good friend that passes, and usually a loss is very difficult to deal with. And sometimes people just don't really sometimes want mementos around because they think of the sadness that this person, used to fulfill an area of their lives, and now it's not there anymore. Do you find that having mementos, let's say the recipe cards, for instance, or as you talked about in your book, your grandmother's china cabinet, there was a situation, you show a picture in there, a photo of you with a little Christmas men, and there was a boy that had made that, and you have a story about that. Do you feel that really helps to heal that pain so that we can move on and actually remember people in a very playfully loving, good way?
I feel that, first of all, I really think that grieving, when you've had a loss, a good friend, a relative in your family, actually sometimes even something personal, you lose some part of your health or something like that. But I think grieving is a really long and lonely journey, and to me it's a very personal thing. There isn't really a right or wrong way. In fact, I was fortunate because a friend of mine told me after my mother died, and I was surprised because, as I talk about in the book, my mother and I weren't ever very close, and so I didn't think that it was going to, obviously I knew I was going to feel sad when my mother died, but also part of me kind of thought, well, how can I miss a relationship that I never really had? And
Right.
Oh my. I missed my mother more than I would ever realize. And at first, when I was still in Cuba City and I was going through her things, I found myself, putting on like her class ring or another ring that she had, and I wore those for probably several weeks. And then all of a sudden it was just like, I don't want anything around from my mother. I can't deal with it. I can't stand looking at it. And I tucked everything away. And, I've been bringing things out in their own time. So, that was just my way of processing and grieving. And the reason even, a few weeks ago I was still going through recipes is because I am constantly bringing things out and, okay, it's fine, I can go through this now. Because truthfully, sometimes, like watching an old video that has my mom in it or something like that, I don't want to go there. Maybe it's just a particular day, or because I know I'm going to cry and I know the pain I'm going to feel again. So I think it really depends on whatever is right for the person. Whatever they feel is right for them, they should do. Whether somebody says, oh, you should be over that by now, I don't think that's so. I think grieving is really a personal journey.
Well, I completely agree with that. In fact, it's funny how we had a guest on our program who has the Grieving Handbook, and this was an author who had studied grieving for more than 30 years, and he says, it's really interesting when you look at the societal cliches about grieving. Oh, don't worry, they've been on to another place, or you're going to get better, those kinds of things that we try to do to help comfort people. And it could be, putting the mementos away just so you don't try to think about them, just as you were describing, putting on the ring and then all of a sudden feeling that you just didn't want those things around, that it really is a personal thing. But sometimes you can't always escape those things that you think you can put away. For instance, you and your husband have been married now 32 years, I understand, right?
Yes, it'll be 33 this December.
Now, I know, if that time comes that he should pass before you, it's going to be hard to avoid seeing ketchup or toilet paper.
Yes. My husband always makes sure we have plenty of ketchup and toilet paper. You would never want to run out of that. And I've thought about that too. I'm 56, my husband is 6 years older than I am, and we really have it's not the first marriage for either of us, but it's just, we are like so blessed because our marriage just keeps getting better and better. I mean, sometimes it feels like we've been married 32 years because we just have all this history, and then other times, oh my heavens, we can't believe how quickly the years have passed. And I don't know if my husband, if my husband passed and I was left here in the house, I do imagine I would have to barrel through with the tears because I would want to be sleeping with it shirt. And you're right, every corner you turned would be, you would see things that reminded you of your husband. But I probably what I would do in my own grieving is I would kind of use my boogeyman strategy. One of my chapters in my book talks about that there might be a boogeyman. There just might be a boogeyman hiding underneath my bed. And that really, for me, is kind of a symbol of fear and anxiety and sadness. And so I would probably have to work out a system with myself to say, okay, here it is again. I'm feeling really, really sad. I'm missing my husband. I'm out of my mind, crazy sad about it. Okay, here it is. I'm not going to try to chase it away. I'm going to recognize it. And, I would figure out some sort of game plan ahead of time so I could move on, at least to get through the day.
Now, what were some, if your husband does help you cook or prepare things in the kitchen, are recipes the two of you enjoy working on together, and why?
Well, one of the things, we had a fun thing one Labor Day weekend. We did a bread bake-off just for fun. I threw the idea out to him, and I didn't know what he would say, and he picked up on it right away. Yeah, let's do it. So it was our little contest between the two of us. And my husband baked, I forget exactly what the name of the bread was, but I suppose it doesn't matter because he'll never make it again. He said if we needed any extra bricks in lining the back patio, we could use this bread. The poor guy, the bread turned out terrible. Absolutely terrible. And
Since there's no rain in Florida, that's possible, right?
Yes, right. And I love to make cinnamon rolls. Actually, it's an old recipe. I made cinnamon rolls, and then I made a daisy braid bread that you use out of the same recipe, which again is in my book. And it's a recipe that we used to use when I was in high school in home economics class, like a cool rice, so you can put it in the refrigerator overnight, and then the students come back the next day, and you can work with the dough again. So my husband and I love working on projects like that, and he comes up with creative ways to have the dough rise, like we're going to put it in the car. Here in Florida that works. It, might not work where you are all year long. And also we put it on the dryer sometimes. But cooking is one of the things that we really enjoy doing together. We're also looking at making, for instance, like a soup this weekend, a shrimp corn chowder soup, something new we're going to try.
That's interesting. Fascinating stuff here. Now, with all of the recipes that you have in the book, share with our listeners probably one of the wildest stories where people say to themselves, I believe Sasquatch exists more than I believe that story.
well, one of the, there are some recipes in the book that were served at my birthday party one year, and it was a surprise birthday party, yet I actually did all of the cooking for it. I had been, for a number of weeks, a girlfriend and I had been cooking every other week. We'd make something different. And we had decided the week of my birthday, not because we were celebrating my birthday, it just happened to fall on that day, the day before, that we were going to make some Chinese dishes. So we made a whole bunch of Chinese food. And usually my friend would take some home, and she said, well, that's okay, I don't want to take any home. But I was very persistent, so we packaged some up. She took it home. Later on that night, around 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and outside were all of these friends, including the woman I had done the cooking with, and she was bringing her share of the leftovers back, because the dinner that night was Chinese. Someone else brought the cake and ice cream, and it was a surprise party for me, and my husband pulled it off, and I did all of the work.
I like the story that you talk about and hear about the all-you-can-drink buffet and mosquitoes.
Yes, that's another pesky thing in Florida. My husband and I can go outside. Same evening, we're sitting out there. The mosquitoes hover around me, and they just start, having lunch, and they don't bother my husband at all. So my husband has, he's constantly I'm itching and scratching. And so I did have an incident one day where I asked my husband to bring me the hydrocortisone cream so I could calm down my mosquito bites. He accidentally brought me a specialized tube of toothpaste that the dentist had given him. So I'm spreading this all over my legs and my arms. Of course, it did nothing for my mosquito bites, but I did smell minty fresh. So.
Now, Suzanne, I think one of the most important elements that our listeners should understand about Muffins and Mayhem, as we were discussing earlier in the program, it's a way that somebody, if they can't think of one, can leave a legacy, a part of saying, I was here and this is who I was in the world. How would you suggest our listeners can get started and maybe kind of find their own legacy, if you will?
Well, an easy way to do that, you don't have to write a memoir like I did, but you can go to the Muffins and Mayhem, it's muffinsandmayhem.com, to my website. And one of the things that I've provided there is an opportunity for you to create your own cookbook of memories. And you can do it at your own speed. So you can go there and type in one of your favorite recipes, and you can also type in a story about it, or just a few comments about it, like, Aunt Helen always loves this dish, and this is what happened the last time. Just a few comments about it. And you don't have to do it all in one sitting. You might go there one night, type in some recipes, come back, type in some stories. But when you get done, whenever you decide that, you're finished, you can print out the pages, take it over to any office supply store or anywhere that, they can put a spiral thing in it and bind it for you. And you'll end up with your own cookbook of memories that you can share with your family and your friends. You can even email, let's say you wanted to email people in your family and ask them to submit a recipe and a memory to add to the book. So it's an easy way for you to make your own cookbook of memories.
Outstanding. It was a pleasure to have you on the program to be able to share with people how they could, leave their own legacy behind and also have a lot of fun doing it. We want to thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, go ahead and give out your website, the one we were talking about earlier.
I have two websites. One is Dear Reader, DEAR Reader.com, where you can sign up to sample free books. Monday through Friday, there are 11 different genres, 12, including the classics. And you can sample a book in 5-minute chunks, Monday through Friday. At the end of the week, if you like it, You can check it out at your library or go to your favorite bookstore, and every Monday we feature a new book for you to sample. I also write a daily column there. Oh, and by the way, I also bake chocolate chip readers for cookies every month, overnight them to them, and we give away a lot of other weird things, bubble machines, heating pads, all kinds of things. And then my other website is muffinsandmayhem.com. And you can, you can get to one site from the other. So please do stop by and send me an email if you have a comment on the book. I answer all of my mail, and I love to hear from readers.
Very good. Well, Suzanne Beecher, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you.
You bet. We also want to thank you, the listeners out there. Encourage you, pick up Muffins and Mayhem. If nothing more, you've got great recipes and great stories all at the same time. Also, be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter, and also visit us at our blog where we archive our shows and have great multimedia information for you to use, as well as share with others. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.